Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our first ever TEQSA Talks webinar. I'm Dr. Mary Russell, the Acting CEO of TEQSA. And I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia for their continuing connection to land, waters and community, and to pay our respects to their cultures and country and elders past and present. So today I'm joined by Dr. Lenka Uchnik, our Assistant Director of TEQSA's Higher Education Integrity Unit, and Brian Alchin, our Assistant Director of Policy Research and Engagement. Lenka will be speaking today about the request for information that's due to be received by us from you in July, and the resources that we have on our website to help with the preparation and response to those. Brian will talk today about TEQSA's upcoming consultations, including the next phase of our Service Charter review that will be out for consultation later today. But we'll begin by an update that I'll provide about some of the key focus areas for TEQSA in the most recent 3 months, including the Australian Universities Accord final report, the whole of government response to the visa integrity system and the impacts that that's having for providers, and how self-assurance will increasingly play a part in TEQSA's regulatory processes. But first, a little housekeeping that we need to cover. So we've designed the TEQSA Talks series to be as interactive as possible, with questions and answers at the end of each of these sessions. So we'd ask you to post your questions at any time in the Q&A starting from now. For questions that we may have to take on notice or where we simply run out of time, we'll ensure that we provide responses later. If for some reason you can't post your question on the Q&A, please email it to comms@TEQSA, COMMS, @TEQSA, TEQSA.gov.au, and our moderator will pick it up. We'll be answering our questions at the end once Lenka, Brian and I have presented. Also, today's session will be recorded and the video will be posted on our website. We'll let you know how you can access it when it's ready in the coming days. So, because this is the first of our webinars, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes just talking about what it is that we're hoping for from these sessions. So we want to structure these in a way that is as useful to you as possible. What we envisage at this stage, subject to your feedback, is that the format may vary somewhat. So today, as I said, we're providing some brief updates and taking questions and answers. But on other occasions, we expect that these webinars might involve a much deeper dive into a current issue or an area of focus for TEQSA's work or a key issue that is live for the sector. Questions in Q&A are going to be important for us to actually get a sense of what's useful for you, what you'd like more of, key areas that you might want to focus on in future. But we'll also be sending out a survey at the end of this session to all of you who've registered, to your registration emails, inviting you to give us some more feedback and share your thinking about how we can make these, as I said, really useful and informative sessions for you. Without further delay then, I'll begin with the updates. And I guess front of mind for most of you across the sector, and certainly for us at TEQSA, is the work of the Australian Universities Accord. The final report, of course, was released in February. I expect that some of you will have read the entire document, others will have read the exec summary, which is also a really useful resource. The Accord itself presents a really broad and long-term vision. So, you know, the focus and the suggestions and the thinking for the Accord is really envisaged to be work that will be developed over some decades into the future. But the priorities and next steps are going to be the decision of government. So like the sector, we're now looking forward to hearing the government's response and particularly to understand what the next steps and the immediate focus areas out of the Accord are going to be. Until that time, our main focus remains on working with the Department of Education and our colleagues at ASQA on the key priorities from the interim report. Those include strengthening university governance, student wellbeing and support, and an uplift in the prevention and response to gender-based violence and the prevention of sexual harm across the sector. Once the government's response is released, I expect that we'll have more to say about TEQSA's role and more detail about new initiatives or approaches that we'll be working on. Of course, we'll keep you informed in weeks ahead, and I fully expect that we'll be having ongoing discussions about this well throughout the year and into the future. Another issue that we know is live for you in the sector, as it is for us, is the question of visa integrity. So you'll be aware that the government has been doing extensive initial policy work and initiatives around strengthening visa integrity, including and in particular around how it's impacting the higher education and the vet sectors. The Nixon and migration reviews highlighted some areas of really significant concern about student visas. At the most extreme end, this includes criminal activity and exploitation of both visa arrangements and of students. The government, through the Department of Home Affairs, has implemented some early measures to manage these risks, and ASQA is also very active working in this space. We know from our discussions with providers and with some of the peak bodies who are online today that some of these early measures are having an impact for the sector. Within our regulatory remit, we're also calibrating our settings and activities to ensure that we have the right focus on these risks. We've already increased our monitoring of prisms and other data to identify areas of potential non-compliance or concern. And providers can expect us to be in touch if we need to clarify whether there are risks or issues in your higher education institution and to seek further information about your activities in this area. In most of the cases to date, when we've been undertaking this monitoring and compliance work, providers have been able to provide that information and sufficiently reassure us of compliance. But where there is a significant concern, excuse me, of non-compliance, you can expect that we'll be moving into our compliance framework about that. So I do want to make a key point about this important work. And that's really about the seriousness of the underlying concerns about both the exploitation of the system and also of the criminality. So we don't presume that this is limited to the vet sector and does not extend to the higher education sector. In fact, there are signs that it does. And to that extent, we will be active in looking at how we can enhance and deploy our regulatory tools to make sure that those risks are well identified, are being effectively managed by providers, and where necessary, that we follow up with decisive regulatory action. Future government decisions in this area may require us to implement further changes around monitoring and responding with our regulatory tools, and we'll keep you updated in coming months about this. So the last thing I want to talk about, and for many of you this will be a continuation of conversations that we've had at the last couple of TEQSA conferences, is to really call out that we're continuing our work about how to promote, recognise and utilise providers' self-assurance activities as part of our regulatory work. And, you know, just to recap, the Higher Education Standards Framework really sets out the types of expectations and requirements of competent providers that, if they're in place and if they're working effectively, will go a long way towards managing continuing and episodic risks. But we do recognise that the effectiveness of those measures and the effectiveness of that risk management rests largely with providers. What we're looking to do is emphasise more in our regulatory assessments the ways that we can rely on the information and self-assurance that you have, not only about what you're doing, but how you know that that those measures are effective, where you're identifying weaknesses or problems, the types of activities that you're putting in place to continue to enhance your response and to manage risks. So of course, self-assurance is not only good for business and education practice, but it's important for the sector and its reputation as a whole. And in taking this approach, we want to make sure that as far as possible, our regulatory requests for information are aligned with the sorts of things that you are and should be doing anyway as part of your ongoing work. We all have different parts to play, and you'll certainly see an increase in the types of information and the depth of information that we ask you to submit about your ongoing self-assurance activities. So I do want to encourage you to keep this at the forefront of your minds, and at the end of the seminar today, to really go back and think about what sort of a pulse check you may need, where there might be some areas that that you can attend to early as part of your ongoing improvement activities. This is certainly not an area that is going to that serves providers to leave until the time of a regulatory assessment. It's something where we want to encourage you to be very active and focused on an ongoing basis. So we may well have questions about that, but for now I'd like to conclude my update and hand over to Linka.
Thank you, Mary. So today I'm going to give a brief update on TEQSA's artificial intelligence request for information. As many of you may know, in March of this year, the Chief Commissioner wrote to all providers informing them that in the middle of this year we'll be issuing an RFI requesting all providers to submit actionable plans on how they're assessing and mitigating the risks posed by generative AI on their offerings. We've intentionally not specified any fixed expectation on what the plan should look like. Australia has a diverse range of higher education providers, and we understand that it's not to be a one-size-fits-all. However, in general, what TEQSA expects is that plans will take into account the breadth of a provider's offerings, including location, modes of delivery, and student cohorts, with equity considerations regarding access and accessibility. Also, plans should consider the requirements of professional accreditation where relevant. Plans should be actionable and have realistic timelines attached, and this can be short, medium and long term. We also expect that all actions should be monitored and have their efficacy assessed, and they should include information on how peak corporate and academic governance bodies are oversighting the risks and assuring quality. And finally, it would be great if the plans could also describe the mechanisms you're putting in place, such as strategies, change management plans and steering groups that are or will be put in place. To further support the upcoming RFI, we've set up a dedicated web page on the TEQSA website. This page has a copy of the letter from the Chief Commissioner, a key considerations document, and FAQs which are being regularly updated over the coming months. There's also a recording of a webinar that we held in March for providers. This webinar also provides a timeline of our activities to date, so I shan't repeat them today. We've also additionally got a dedicated AI Good Practice Hub, which was launched on the TEQSA website last year in April, with curated resources that are regularly updated. It also has a series of 5 webinars that we held in collaboration with Deakin Centre for Research and Assessment and Digital Learning between February and September 2023, as well as the final version of the Principles for Assessment Reform, which was developed by 17 experts in teaching, assessment design and AI and launched last year at TEQSA Conference. As Mary mentioned earlier, the RFI will be issued in June and it will be via the provider portal, and submission deadlines will be a month later in early July, also through the portal. Following our review of all provider submissions, we hope to use this information gathered to not only gain a better understanding of the variety of approaches providers are taking, but also to provide additional support for the sector by including such things as good practice examples, pending approval from providers. Anyway, thank you, and now I'll hand over to Brian for his update.
Cool, thanks Linka. So I want to start today just by giving a bit of an outline around our upcoming consultation activities and the approach we're taking this year. So first up, as we're all well aware, there's been a lot asked of the higher education sector from the government over the past 18 months. The government obviously has a very ambitious reform agenda. There have been numerous initiatives and issues that are seeking the sector's expertise, knowledge and input on. We've also had, during the last little period, a number of providers and peaks asked that TEQSA, where possible, slow down on some of our consultation activities given the pending changes stemming from the Accord and other reviews. So we're seeking here, with what we're doing, to really spread out where we can some of our consultation activities and trying to just help spread that load over a longer period of time. Alongside this, we're also working to improve the capacity and skills of our people to better deliver stakeholder engagement activities, actually deliver a better result. This includes development of a new stakeholder engagement strategy, which I'll discuss in a second, but also investing in training for our people so that when they engage with you, we do so in a meaningful way that delivers the best outcomes. So the first pending consultation I wish to outline is our service charter. As you may recall, TEQSA does currently have a service charter, which it was last updated in July 2020. For a number of reasons, including the COVID lockdowns that impacted Melbourne, where we are based for 2 years, and other decisions at the time, the required investments in systems and staff training to really bring that document to life and embed it into our operations never really happened. So we've never really had the ability to measure against those targets or even report on them. Understandably, the sector has sort of raised this with us as a concern, and last August, alongside the cost recovery consultation, we launched a review of the service charter. Part of this review was the survey that provided some really clear insights in the feedback we received about what people were expecting from us in relation to our service standards and service approach. The insights gathered also reinforced what we were hearing elsewhere, in that the standard of service is inconsistent, that people are wanting to see greater transparency around how TEQSA is performing against its service targets, and ensuring that our service charter also incorporated our TEQSA values, but also outlined the legislative timelines for regulatory decisions. So we've incorporated this feedback into a draft charter that we're releasing for consultation later today. The updated charter aligns with the other regulatory agency service charters, including ASQA, which we reviewed as part of this project. The charter sets out clear standards for our inquiries, our expectations around those who we engage with, and also incorporates our TEQSA values based on that feedback. It is also important to note that the charter also reflects our commitment to continual improvement. We're well aware that we need to invest in systems and training for our staff to improve the standard of service people receive from us. We're being upfront and transparent in acknowledging this, and it will take some time to achieve. It's something we also openly acknowledge. But we are committed to reporting our progress transparently on our website as we go forward. We're also committed to evolving these targets as changes to our regulatory approach and efficiencies gained by other investments in new technologies come to bear. The consultation opens later today and will close on Monday, 20 May. We will consider all feedback and finalise our service charter during June and hope to begin implementation from July this year. Alongside this, we're investigating a new inquiries management software function to support better management of customer inquiries and improving that standard of service you'll receive from us, and also training our staff appropriately in how to use that. Our expectation is, given the many other demands that TEQSA currently has, is that we have this first round of work in place no later than December, enabling us to begin reporting against our performance with the service standards from 1 January 2025, with updates on that progress being published on our website in July 2025. Of course, we appreciate your patience with us while we implement this and we get up to speed. And we really welcome any feedback you may have on the draft charter that we are putting out for a consultation. And of course, we also remain open to any feedback, good or bad, about the service you receive from TEQSA outside of this consultation period as well. Another strategy that is going to be released for consultation later today, and it relates to our stakeholder service charter, is our stakeholder engagement strategy. As I mentioned, we are looking at how we can better improve our stakeholder engagement activities, and given the obvious relationship with the service charter, we thought it was a good time to put it out alongside it. The draft strategy details the key principles informing our approach to stakeholder engagement to support us to deliver the objectives outlined in TEQSA's 23 to 27 corporate plan. The draft strategy supports consistent, purposeful, meaningful and productive and transparent stakeholder engagement that delivers benefits for all involved. It is based on the Australian Public Service Framework for Engagement and incorporates best practice stakeholder engagement theory and approaches, including that outlined by the International Association for Public Participation, commonly known as IAP2, which some people may be familiar with. Again, this is open for this document will be on our website for consultation later today, and the consultation will close on Monday, May 20 at 5 p.m. Finally, and thank you for bearing with me while I go through all of these, we're also consulting today around proposed amendments to the Fit and Proper Person Determination 2018. By way of background, this determination is a legislative instrument that sets out the information to specify matters that TEQSA may have regard to when determining whether a person is fit and proper in accordance with the TEQSA Act. These proposed amendments to the determination mean that it will appropriately align with the relevant content of Schedule 3 of the Standards for Registered Training Organisations 2015, concerning the fit and proper person requirements in the vocational education sector, and also the Higher Education Support Fit and Proper Person Instrument 2019, which sets out the fit and proper person requirements the Minister applies under the Higher Education Support Act. So the proposed changes we're outlining here are to keep what is currently in the existing determination, but to add the following. So TEQSA may have regard to whether a relevant person has been found guilty of a foreign offence under section of the Crimes Act there. With this change, what we're really looking here is to enable TEQSA to consider if a person who is applying to have a leadership or a decision-making capacity with a higher education provider, if they have been convicted of a foreign offence, to be able to have that consideration in regards to they're a fit and proper person. The other proposed change is related to whether or not a person has been found fit or proper for the purpose of any law under the Commonwealth or a state and other state and territory. So this means we can consider if someone's been approved or rejected elsewhere by another regulatory agency in Australia. And finally, the last proposed amendment is about whether the public is unlikely to have confidence in a relevant person's suitability to be a person who makes or participates in making decisions that affect the whole or substantial part of a registered higher education provider's affairs. Again, this allows TEQSA to then consider if there is any issues around public confidence as we're making a determination. This proposed amendment will be available on our website later today, and again, the consultation for this will close on the 20th of May at 5 p.m. You can access all of these documents later today from our website at teqsa.gov.au/consultation. And again, if there's any further feedback or anything you wish to provide, please do reach out to us. Back to you, Mary.
Thank you, Brian. And clearly Brian had memorised all of those details. So that concludes the formal updates that we had planned to share with you today. I do want to stress, though, that for all of those consultations, and particularly for the stakeholder engagement and the service charter, we're really aware that we want these to be a good reflection of the things that are important to you, and that we strive to really embed and make work effectively within TEQSA's activities. So please do take the time to read and consider them, and to provide us with feedback. The service charter in particular is something that we expect will start with the work that we're doing at the moment, but will continue to evolve over coming years as we make refinements and improvements to our regulatory processes. So what I would like to do now is to go to questions and hand over to Sam, our moderator for this part of the talk.
Okay, we do have a question that's come through that we'll kick things off with. The question reads, as far as I can find, self-assurance is mentioned in only 2 of TEQSA's documents, the guidance note concerning academic governance and the application guide for renewal of registration for existing providers. Can there be some comment on the paucity of resources for something that seems so significant?
It's a really good look. That's a really good question, and I suspect that that's one that we will we'll do our best to answer today. But we'll also give consideration to for future guidance or activities that we can pick up in future sessions and at our TEQSA conference. I guess the significance of self-assurance is that it really provides the evidence for you within your organisation to make judgments about how effectively you're meeting the standards and how effectively you're applying the relevant measures and safeguards to achieve their intent. This is the type of activity that ought to be and normally is happening within higher education providers anyway. However, it's in TEQSA's history about regulatory assessments, it tends to be that we've placed greater emphasis on examining primary evidence of things like minutes or action plans, rather than also taking into account what you've already done to respond to issues and concerns, and how you can tell whether you've effectively managed and responded to those and are managing risks. So it is certainly an area where we will develop more guidance over time, If I can share a spoiler with you, certainly in speaking with chairs of academic boards, they flagged a request for us to deal with the question of academic risk at the TEQSA conference. So we're working up something that can craft a meaningful picture of academic risk and academic risk management and self-assurance as it applies in our sector to the sorts of activities that are done. So it's not static. We want to leverage off what you're doing. The early work that we've done with providers who are coming up for re-registration, where we've invited people to tell us about your self-assurance activities, has been really compelling. So it's really helped our understanding to have that narrative and that evidence from providers to tell us things that we otherwise might not have understood about how you've been acting on problems. So this is certainly not an implication that these activities are not happening. It's about picking up that information, inviting you to give evidence that is relevant to your context and your activities so that we can have regard to that when we're doing our regulatory assessment. Thanks,
okay,
Sam.
Next question. When is this year's TEQSA conference?
So the pre-conference workshops will be on the 12th of November and the conference proper will be on Wednesday the 13th of November in Melbourne.
Thank you, Mary.
So hold the date in your diary, please. And as I said, the workshops, we're really looking to kind of broaden some of those workshops so that they have appeal and relevance to quite a range of our stakeholders again this year.
Next question. Public confidence is a vague concept when assessing fit and proper suitability. What might be some examples of things to be considered, especially as providers will be making this assessment when inviting, for example, board members?
It's a very good question. It's part of the reason why this document is out for consultation. We are seeking feedback from providers around how they believe these standards these proposed amendments actually could be implemented and adjusted. Again, as part of this, we'd also be looking at a range of various factors and we'll be putting out appropriate guidance once this amendment is made.
So just to add to what Brian is saying on that, we'd like to hear from you what some of the dilemmas are and some of the practices that are adopted already. There are, of course, legal considerations in determining a fit and proper person. That's the purpose of updating the determination. But in a practical sense, there are also a number of sources of governance expertise in terms of what constitutes good practice for recruitment, for conducting due diligence when appointing individuals to key governance and leadership roles in organisations. So we'll also be interested to hear further questions and we can provide additional clarity around that in due course.
Okay, next question. And before I do, I'll just send a quick reminder out to everyone to post their questions in the Q&A chat, please. Okay, so the next question. Are providers required to ask existing board members to complete new FPP forms? Sorry, fit and proper persons forms.
Got that. Thank you. We'll provide. Well, we'll get back with more detail. It's the type of thing that I imagine that there will be variations in practice. What we would expect is that providers see it as part of your ongoing good governance processes to continue to affirm that not only do you have the right mix of expertise in your governing bodies, including both your academic and your corporate board, but also that you're picking up any important changes that may impact on someone's fit and proper status.
Next question. How will TEQSA work with the new student ombudsman?
Okay, really good question. So the role for a future National Student Ombudsman has been called out by government, but the work of framing up what the role and remit of the Ombudsman's office will be, where that will be situated, how it will work, is still in development. So that's something where there will be, we would expect some further consultation and announcements from the Department of Education in due course to reflect decisions of government. consideration is being given, and we're working with the department to look at how to make sure that we can work as seamlessly as possible with both the department and also with the Student Ombudsman's Office. So, you know, that is really going to be determined by what ultimately is the scope and the nature of the role and the way of working of the Ombudsman. Consideration will be given to the types of matters that will be considered by the Ombudsman and the types of matters that TEQSA would continue to consider as part of our, particularly our cyclic registration and re-registration processes. So I can't give you an absolutely specific answer on that yet because the work's still developing. However, I can assure you that one of the key considerations for us is making sure that it's as seamless as possible, and that sticking points of duplication or differing expectations are anticipated and as far as possible managed, so that it's a smooth and continuous system for providers and also for students. What I would add, so afterthought, is that it's important to recognise that that all of the consideration that's been given to the concept of setting up a National Student Ombudsman adds to, rather than replacing, the key role that providers have in having systems and processes to respond as the first point of call for students' concerns and complaints. So that will remain a really, really important part of what is expected of providers, and as we would expect, many of you already recognise and have really strong practices in that area. Sam, do you have more?
I do. Well, I don't. Next question. Is TEQSA considering and or reflecting upon how quality assurance processes fail to improve student learning curves?
That's a good question. I don't have a specific answer to that. I guess that, you know, one of the things that we do recognise is that you know, ways of delivering learning and teaching are not static and will not be able to remain static over time. You know, our higher education sector and environment, the international environment, are continuing to change. Students' expectations continue to change, and you know, the work that that the Higher Education Integrity Unit is undertaking at the moment reflects that as an absolute matter of priority. Assessment needs to continue to change and develop in order to be effective in dealing with some of the threats to integrity. Now, assurance isn't going to provide the answer to any of those things, but it is going to remain really important in determining where things are tracking well and where things are not, and further work is going to be needed.
Next question. The University's Accord final report suggests putting TEQSA under the umbrella of a proposed Tertiary Education Commission. What is TEQSA's position on this?
So TEQSA is waiting for the decision of government on this. You will appreciate that that we did provide input to the Accord, but not from the perspective of you know, having a view about whether we should be within or outside any proposed Tertiary Education Commission. So for those of you who want to scrutinise our submissions to the Accord, those are published amongst the Accord consultation submissions, but our response to that will be to work with whatever is the decision of government about where TEQSA sits and how it interfaces with any Tertiary Education Commission.
And on reports, is TEQSA planning to release a report on the annual compliance priorities for the year?
Do you want to answer that?
Yes, certainly. We are currently just finalising a report. We are finalising the annual compliance report for 2023, which includes the upcoming priorities for 2024, and that should be published on our website in the coming weeks. We'll communicate that out when we do publish through our social media channels, through our TEQSA e-news, and also through a news item on our website, so it will be coming shortly.
Thank you. This question is for Lenka. I'm concerned about the very quick turnaround for the RFI being in a month, in the middle of end of first semester and preparing for semester 2. can TEQSA extend this by an extra month?
Thanks very much. So I understand that 1 month seems like a very short amount of time, but it should come as no surprise that we've been issuing this RFI. We've done engagement activities with the sector all through 2023 and providing support and guidance. And we've also flagged that this RFI is coming through the Chief Commissioner's letter in March. We are not expecting providers to submit fully completed and actioned plans. We are just expecting providers to submit plans that they plan on actioning. So this will include things in the short, medium and long term. In fact, if we actually get any plans where a provider suggests that everything is now in place and ready to go, it might actually raise a few suspicions. So we are not looking for extending deadlines. However, if there are some kind of extenuating circumstances, we would be happy to work with that provider within reason.
I will invite people to submit their questions to the Q&A. I can see that they are starting to slow down, but in the interim, a question that I'm sure providers want to know about is, when will TEQSA be reviewing its cost recovery model?
Thank you for that. So we will be reviewing the cost recovery model further this year, and you can expect to have information about that from us in the second half of the year. So in as early as possible, from July onwards, we'll be feeding back information, and of course we will confirm the requirements, the amounts and the expectations and dates also closer to the end of the year, so that for your planning purposes it's as clear as possible.
Okay, I'll make one final call for questions to be put into the Q&A, and otherwise we'll finish with this last question from me. When will the new CEO be announced?
Thank you, Sam. Look, we hope and expect that the new CEO appointment will be made reasonably soon. There has been a highly competitive process conducted and managed independently by the Department of Education. We know that for the sector, some clarity and certainty around that will be helpful, and we are really looking forward to being in a position to bed down permanent arrangements within TEQSA as well. So watch this space, and we will let you know as soon as we're in a position to do so.
That's the end of our questions by the looks of things, so I'll pass it back to the panellists. Great. So look, thank you very much for joining us in this first experiment of our TEQSA Talks. As I said, we get a sense from your questions, but we also look forward to your feedback, both about the helpfulness of this type of format with updates and Q&A, but also if there are any burning issues and topics that you think merit a deeper dive, we'd be interested to hear about that. So please do take the time to share your thoughts with us. As I said, we want this to be as useful as possible for you, as something that we can have as part of a rolling cycle of communication and engagement with you through the year. So thank you all for your time and your attention for this session, and look forward to speaking with you next time.